Hello everybody, welcome to our Maintainer Track talk for Backstage in Atlanta 2025. The talk title is Backstage Celebrations, Stable Foundations and MCP Innovations. I really picked the hardest thing to say on stage for a talk title. First off, some introductions. My name is Ben. I am a senior engineer at Spotify and a core maintainer of Backstage, and I've been working on it from pretty much day one since we open sourced it, I think, into the community. And today I have with me...
Yep, hello, my name is Patrick. I am also all of those things, and I go by Rugbit on GitHub.
Cool. Let's just dive into a little bit of an agenda and what we're going to be covering today. So first off, we're going to dive into some project updates, just a little bit of numbers slide, just to kind of get you all familiar with the project a little bit. And then we're going to jump into a section called Project Maturity, which is more around like the front end and back end systems and a little bit of an update as to where we're at with those. Then we have a section just called New Stuff. So that's kind of everything that we've been working on since last KubeCon in Europe. And then a roadmap kind of round off at the end just to kind of set the scene for what's hopefully going to come next year or in the next KubeCon. So first off, project updates. So we are at 3,500 adopters, over 250 open source plugins, and 31.8 thousand stars on GitHub. I updated this yesterday because it was 31.7. So now we've jumped a little number. That was great. And then for the community plugins repository. So if people don't know what the community plugins repo is, we used to have like one big mono repo, just Backstage, and that contained all of the core framework and all of the plugins that we had, but that kind of didn't really scale. We had a lot of traction and a lot of people wanting to contribute plugins, and we needed to come up with a little plan. I think we announced community plugins in like Detroit maybe, or maybe Chicago. But some numbers from that repository. We have over 200 packages being published from that repository, as well as 100 workspaces, and most importantly, we have 60 people, or 60 maintainers over working in that repository to help ship these plugins, which is great. I just want to quickly also touch on some tooling that we've built to improve issue quality. So we noticed that there's quite a lot of duplication, and it's kind of tricky to find existing issues. So we added some keywords in the issue body. Now this makes it easier to search and helps reduce duplicates. We also added automation for project areas in the issue body. So when someone creates a new issue and selects a project area, it automatically assigns the right labels and makes sure that maintainers can find and triage things that they own much easier. And finally, we're also including a reproduction repo now when you create an issue. So this has helped cut down on quite a lot of the vague issues that we kind of get or see around the project. So just to make sure these things are actually reproducible. It does add a bit of friction, but overall we found there are much higher quality issues overall. There's a lot more happening in this space. I could talk for hours about our tooling. Maybe we could get to talk about it at the Maintainer Summit next year. I have submitted a talk. Hopefully we can talk more then. Cool. Patrick.
All right, so next up I want to talk about our efforts towards maturing the Backstage project. So we've been hard at work evolving the framework to make it excel at its primary purpose, which really is to build developer portals with well-isolated plugins that are easy to maintain. And you still need to be able to integrate all of these different features and plugins together to provide a cohesive user experience. Okay, let's back up a bit though. This is a thing we've talked about for quite a while. When we started the Backstage project, we really had no idea what the best way was to fit everything together. We went for a code-first approach, where you wired plugins together using TypeScript. A benefit of this was that you could fall back and write functionality outside of the framework, so you could have new patterns emerging that way. But it does have a bunch of downsides. You need to know TypeScript to get started with Backstage. The way different plugins are installed can vary quite a lot, and it all makes it trickier to maintain an installation over time. So declarative integration is a term that is the term we use for this initiative to move away from integrating features using code, and instead aim to shift the Backstage framework to provide a more drop-in solution for installing plugins. So this graphic is something we've used before to talk about declarative integration. This one represents our goal to reduce the number of lines of code needed in and out of the box Backstage backend setup. So it was a big driver for the design of our current backend system, which is now fully rolled out. Now, if you've been along us for that journey, I'm sure you'll agree that the new backend system is a much nicer experience and easier to maintain compared to the old system. And of course, we're now on the exact same journey with the new frontend system. This is the structure of an out-of-the-box setup with our old system. Comparing it to what we just saw for the backend, there's quite a little bit more code here, and it's really more complex. In the frontend, features tend to be more spread out and nested within each other, and there's some of the communication happening across those boundaries. It's not quite as clean as in the backend. So it really has been a bigger challenge to enable declarative integration in the frontend system, but we're almost there, and I'll give a few more updates on that in a bit. But where are we going through all of this trouble to make these large changes to the framework? It really comes down to the benefits of having isolated plugins with clear communication paths. And there are two sides to that coin. It enables a plugin ecosystem that provides much more value. Plugins are more predictable, we can build more tooling around them, and it's much easier to install third-party plugins and keep them up to date. At the same time, it provides similar benefits to internally developed plugins, and I think that's just as important, if not more important, for Backstage adopters. Isolating your plugins lets you experiment, double down, decommission, shift focus, or ship whatever you vibed up, all with more confidence. An internal developer portal in any large organization, almost by definition, is a collection of different features that all need to be glued together in a loose but still kind of structured way. Now, let me illustrate this whole thing with a quick demo. So I'm gonna press that thing, and then I'm gonna turn down the brightness on the screen. There we go. Okay, got some talk notes. Okay, here we go. So here I have a very empty Backstage app. So this one is completely devoid of any features whatsoever. It's not quite what you get out of the box. I do have some cheat codes installed though. So I can use one of them to bring up this little control panel here. So this lets me control this app. I have a little visualization here to the right, which is the extension structure of this app. Let's start by adding a couple of features. I'll add a base homepage. It'll do for the demo, it's not great. I'll continue adding user settings. You can see it shows up in the sidebar over here. Let's customize the sidebar as well, give it a better layout, put the homepage at the top, have the settings at the bottom, and let's throw in a custom logo as well to make it look a bit nicer. Okay, so now that we have the base app set up, let's get a couple of plugins going. I'm gonna dial it up to about there. So we have search plugin, software templates, software catalog. Have a single example entity, so you can see this is the base catalog page, just a bit of metadata. So we can do more than that. Let's keep dialing up the number of plugins in this app. So you can see we got sidebar items being added. We got cards being added to the entity page, and content tabs as well here with the APIs, Q&A, ADRs, and feedback and so on. Now, there's some demo magic going on here, but that's all in the control panel. The front-end system is doing all of the heavy lifting. Really, as I'm dialing up that dial, it's the equivalent of running a yarn ad and installing the plugin in an app. So I hope this just illustrates the simplicity that we're aiming for with the new front-end system. Just a way to show that. All right, let me head back in that way. And I am back on the slides. Okay, yep, so I promised an update on where we are with the new front-end system. Just before KubeCon EU this year, we encouraged plugin authors to adopt the new system by adding support for it in their plugins. The goal was both to gather feedback, but also to get the ball rolling so that by the time everyone starts adopting the new system in their apps, there's already plenty of plugins that you can use directly. Now, over the last 6 months, we've been expanding support across the community plugins, and many of them now work right out of the box. So the demo I just showed only uses plugins that natively support the new front-end system. Now, we do, of course, also have conversion utilities, so that even if a plugin doesn't support the new front-end system, you can still install it, but it's always nice not needing to use those. The 1.42 release this August was a big milestone for us. We officially marked the new front-end system as ready for adoption in all apps, which is one of the final pieces of the puzzle. It also brought a number of improvements, like better conversion utilities, the ability to create blueprints with type parameters, and a bunch of cleanup. And that brings us to where we are today, which is not 1.0, just yet. We had hoped to be there by this KubeCon, but there's still things we want to refine, and we have already made some adjustments based on feedback, but we're waiting for a bit more feedback to be a bit more confident. And so we do also want to switch the new system to be the default for new apps as well. And we'd prefer a little bit more support from the ecosystem, and also better documentation for how to build apps from scratch using the system. Finally, there will also be that last round of API review that we do, and then we'll be ready for 1.0. No promises, but the goal is to be there early next year before KubeCon EU possible. All right, let's have a look at what's been going on in the backend system as well. I'm going to focus specifically on some of the recent additions contributed by the community. First is this contribution from Thomas. He added support for changing the behavior of the built-in logging via configuration. So you can now set individual log levels, custom global fields, but what's especially handy is that you can override the log levels based on individual fields. So you can, for example, disable the HTTP logs, like you see in this example, or enable debug logging for a specific plugin or a single catalog provider. Sticking to the topic of configuration, Beth made it possible to configure the root HTTP server. It's now much easier to set things like request timeouts and limits, since you don't have to override the entire service through code, which used to be the case. Next one is a bit more in the weeds. Juan Pablo added support for extending the service auth system with custom external auth schemes. So this is useful if you're calling Backstage plugins from outside of your Backstage deployment, and you want to use something more advanced than the built-in alternatives here, so you can kind of plug in your own auth system. And lastly, Heikki added the Backstage env environment variable. This makes it much easier to select configuration files for different environments. It's also neat for local development because it will pick up any of the local files that you might have. Now, this is just a short list of contributions to the backend system that we've thought were useful for adopters, but there have, of course, been many more contributions across this project and some exciting ones on the way as well. So big thanks to everybody that helps keep helping move the project forward. And that's enough of the front-end and back-end system. Let's switch gears and talk about some new things. And for that, I'm going to hand it over to Ben for a round of buzzword bingo.
Yay. Yay, sorry. Yes, so I'm here to talk about MCP. Yeah, it wouldn't be a talk at KubeCon without some AI and MCP, would it? So, it's kind of a big hot topic at the minute. But I first want to back up and talk a little bit about what MCP actually is. So some of you are probably tired of hearing these three letters, while others are maybe not totally sure what it means. And this is not a deep dive on like large language models and LLMs. Like for now, we can just treat the LLM as like a black box and just call it the vendor names like ChatGPT or Claude or Gemini. So MCP, or Model Context Protocol, is an open source standard that connects AI applications to external systems. So in simple terms, it's a way for AI models to plug into other tools and other data sources. So with MCP, models like ChatGPT and Claude, they can connect to like local files, databases, search engines, or existing workflows or APIs that you have in your org. So this lets them access the right information when they need it and actually perform pretty useful tasks rather than just generating text in isolation. So with MCP, there's three key parts. There's tools, there's resources, and there's prompts. Tools define what the actual model can do, and extending the abilities beyond just a simple text generation. And resources and prompts also play an important part, how the model interacts with data. But for the purposes of this talk, I just want to talk around tools, because that's really where Backstage comes in. So with the rise of AI-powered development tools, I guess you could call them, like Cursor and Copilot, Claude Code, it's natural that developers want to bring more of their workflow into these environments that they're using. So these tools are quickly becoming where engineers spend a lot of their day and a lot of their time working. So Backstage has always aimed to be that single hub, that single pane of glass for developers. So there's one place for documentation, software catalog, all your internal tools in one place. And because of that, Backstage already holds a lot of the data and functionality that engineers would love to access from directly within these AI tools. So that's exactly why this issue was created. So the idea was to let Backstage expose its information and actions to these LLMs. And it quickly became one of the most popular feature requests we actually had, because it bridges these two very powerful worlds, like Backstage as like the source of truth, and these AI tools as this new development experience. So at KubeCon EU, we mentioned that this is something that we were wanting to explore. It was like on our last slide in the roadmap thing, I think. But we didn't say back then is that we were already kind of exploring different options for how we could get plugins to expose these tools to LLMs, making it easier for engineers to kind of tap into Backstage right from their development environment. So as an aside, when we were exploring the tools definition for the Model Context Protocol spec, we noticed that they're very similar to Scaffolder actions in Backstage. And if you're not familiar with what the Scaffolder is, it's basically a plugin in Backstage which automates software creation and setup in Backstage. So letting developers define these actions that can get chained together into something that we call templates. On the screen, you'll see a side-by-side example of the same action implemented in both the Model Context Protocol spec and also in a Scaffolder action, as it was back then. And just to see how they closely match up, like they're very similar. They both got input-output schemas and handlers. So what do we actually do? We started off by creating a RFC in the open source repo to propose a new core service called the Actions Registry. And the Actions Registry and its API is both inspired from the Model Context Protocol spec and also the Scaffolder Actions API spec, with a few additions in there and a few sprinkles to support other Backstage framework concepts. And the concept here is simple. You define your action once, and then you can use it wherever, use it anywhere. So we want that same definition to work seamlessly across Backstage, from the Scaffolder, which I'll talk about in the next slide, to being available as tools in an MCP server, and that's where this MCP Actions Backend plugin comes in that I'm going to talk about shortly. So that's essentially the glue that connects these Actions Registry with the Model Context Protocol SDK. So it just turns these actions into callable tools from an MCP client. So first, a little bit of a history about the Scaffolder actions. Historically, every action had to be installed manually, like as an installed module in the Scaffolder backend, and that kind of got messy pretty fast. And with the new setup, that's gone. So each plugin now takes care of registering its own actions and individually, and then these actions can run anywhere in a more distributed way. So they run alongside the plugin that provides them rather than all in this Scaffolder backend context like before. So if you install something like the catalog plugin, it just kind of works now. Like you basically, by installing the catalog plugin, automatically get actions registered into the Actions Registry automatically. And then they're not only just available to the Scaffolder, it's also available to these MCP tools. And then, maybe in the future, there'll be other things that consume the Actions Registry. Okay, one last thing before I do a demo, of which we're all going to pray that the internet works, because it might be a pretty boring demo if it doesn't, but we'll try it. So I want to talk about authentication and authorization. So to connect to this new MCP Actions backend, you need a valid Backstage token, just like you do when you're talking with all other backend plugins. And right now, these tokens require a browser sign-in, which isn't great, because it means that you have to go and copy the authorization header or the token and then paste that into different places you want to call Backstage services with. So static tokens were one workaround, but they're kind of a pain to manage through configuration. They're not tied to users at all, and all their permissions, and they can't be rotated so easily. Oh, excuse me, sorry, my mouth is very dry. Sorry. Yeah, where was I? Static tokens, yes. Model Context Protocol implemented this thing called dynamic client registration. It's part of the OAuth spec. And this allows MCP clients like Cursor or Claude to use an OAuth 2 flow to get a token. So for our implementation, this means it's going to open a pop-up with like a Backstage or Backstage pop-up where you can approve a consent request, and then then the MCP client will get a token for it to consume a valid Backstage token. We've added an experimental version of this in the auth backend, so if you want to go and try it out, please do, and give us some feedback. And it also paved the way for CLI authentication, which is built upon the same tech. And this is going to make tools like the Scaffolder CLI and then other CLIs be so much easier to use more securely from the terminal. All right, let's go into a demo. This is the fun bit. So I have a action which I've implemented. So if anybody was at Backstage Con on Monday, this is going to look very similar to that demo. I can tell you that I think we just came up with the same idea at the same time. But I'm going to go through the demo now. Let me just jump into Cursor. All right. Hopefully you can see this. So I've created an action using the Actions Registry. which is called list talks. And what this does is it basically just uses the KubeCon shed calendar to just return a big JSON blob of all the different events for the title, description, and stuff. And then I want to consume this action in two ways. I'm going to consume it through the scaffolder first, so we're going to take that JSON blob and then basically just create a YAML document out of it, just a big long list of YAML. And then we're also going to use it in Cursor itself using MCP. So let me just jump over to, 1 second. Let me find the actual Chrome window I want. There we go. All right. So I go into create first. I can see this template. I'm just going to hide that. Click on choose. I've just done some UI here, so you can pick a different track for the talks, but we're just going to do it all for now. And then I'm just going to give this a repo, which is going to be BAM demo, some random number that I've not used yet. Click on create. And then this is going to call that action that's defined in that backend plugin, that list talks. And then it's going to go and template this into the YAML file, and then go publish that into a GitHub repo. So if I click on the repository here, I should hopefully see just one file in here. And then in this index YAML, I have just a long list of talks. Now, this is all great, but if you imagine that this is not just talk data, this is more financial data, it's internal data. Being able to consume this sort of model, this data through using an LLM, for instance, can kind of, the possibilities what you could do with that is a lot more endless than just templating into the scaffolder. So I'm going to go over to Cursor and I'm going to add the MCP Actions backend plugin to the MCP list here. So if I go over here and add, let's do KubeCon NA. Let's try one I've not used yet. There we go. Thanks, Cursor. So then this points at the MCP Actions backend that's currently running locally with our demo. I'm going to click on Save. Now you notice that I'm not adding any authentication here. You can add a headers block here and pass an authentication header, but for the purpose of this demo, I want to show you how dynamic client registration works with the auth backend. So if I go to Cursor, you see now I have this needs authentication little pop-up here. So if I click on Connect, this is, if I could click, there we go. Click on Connect, this opens up this part of the plugin called the auth plugin, and this is going to give us a consent request to approve. So I can see that Cursor is asking for my token. That's fine, that seems legit. We'll click on OK. Click on Open here, and now it says 3 tools enabled. So these 3 tools are pretty interesting, right? I can see I have get catalog entity because I've got the catalog running locally. Also provides a validate entity, and then there's my list talks little tool here that also comes from my other plugin. So if I want to consume this as MCP tool now, I can head over to the chat in Cursor and I can say, I am an engineer interested in developer portals. What talks should I go see at KubeCon? And let's see if this actually does what it should do. Yes. So you can see it first off calls the tool, that list talks tool. It's going to go and grab that big JSON blob, and then it's doing something else. There we go. Now it's analyzing all the different talks inside that JSON response to what we should go and see. So hopefully our talks on here, yeah, that's good. And there's some of the Backstage developer portals talks as well. Yeah, so that's kind of all I have for the demo. I'm going to head back to the slides now. And there we go. And now back over to Patrick.
All right, thank you, Ben. Almost time to wrap up. First, I want to give an update on our new design system. So we announced it at the beginning of this year that our goal is to create a bespoke design system and library for Backstage. We're looking for something that's tailored for the kind of information-dense UIs that are typically found in a developer portal, and also trying to be opinionated in the right ways. A bit of a reminder that this is an initiative that's separate from the core framework. It's headed up by Charles, so it's not competing as much for focus. Now, there have been a couple of major updates since the beginning of the year. When we announced it, it was called Canon, but we've renamed it to Backstage UI now, or BUI. And that's both a rename, but it's also a bit of a change in direction. We're now fully focused around Backstage rather than potentially having it be a more general purpose system. We are using a headless component library with unstyled components to build on top of. So we're not building all of this from scratch. It's mostly about styling, component selection, and composition. We did start using base UI from MUI as this library, but it's still in beta, and we wanted to have a little bit more stability under our feet. So we've now switched to React Aria from Adobe instead. Now, that also lets us move a little bit faster, or let us move a bit faster to build out components, and we've now started a rollout. So we, of course, want a period of testing to smooth things out, try the APIs and so on. But where we're looking to start is with adoption in the core feature plugins in the main Backstage repo. So, for example, we're converting the home or scaffolder plugins to use BUI. For this, we don't really need a stable API just yet, because we can handle any breakages in the repo. But we do need to make sure that the theming is stable, and that you can create BUI themes that match your existing themes. Now, to help out with that, we've recently shipped a theme converter in the form of a plugin that you install, and it gives you a BUI theme, so to help out with that conversion. There's also a migration tracker that you can have a peek at if you're interested in how the migration is going. All right, so to round off, I want to give a quick overview of our roadmap. Of course, the new front-end system remains our top priority. We want to make it default for new Backstage apps and then ship 1.0. A lot of work is going into BUI, and the adoption in the main repo will help see how we continue that effort. An area that we want to return to is the plugin ecosystem. We see an opportunity to provide a lot more tooling and guidance in that space, especially with the new front-end systems. There's a lot more we can do to help make it easier to build and use plugins. And we're of course also keeping up with the evolution of MCP, both the spec and the clients, and we want to reuse also some of what we build there, like Ben just showed, in the Backstage CLI to implement similar use cases there. And lastly, we're looking to potentially change our release process. Our monthly releases they're nice and predictable, but we do think there might be some options that allows us to ship functionality faster and let people adopt it quicker.